authors, entertainers to innovators, we connect with those who help shape our culture. Join us in revealing stories of their lives and backgrounds, their triumphs and tragedies that molded them into who they are today. Authentically off-script and personally illuminating, this is Audibles with Jason Scarborough. This week on Audibles, Richard Williams.
The story starts August 22nd, 1945. Good old Rankin County boy, right? Grew up in Rankin County. So what was it like for you growing up in Rankin County?
Well, actually, I was not born in Rankin County. Okay. Now, I was born in California. So that birth date you gave, obviously now everybody knows my age, which is, I'm not sure we want to get that out there, but that's okay. But I was actually born in California. My dad was in the Marines, stationed at Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, and I was born there. And my dad was from Mississippi. And so I guess we were out there maybe 2 or 3 years before he was out of the service, and we moved back to Mississippi. And then other than 1 year, I went to second grade in Sioux City, Iowa, my second grade, because that's my mom's home. Other than that, I've lived in Mississippi. But I didn't move to Rankin County until I was in the 7th grade. I've lived in Morton and Forest and Hollandale and Mount Olive and different jobs my dad had. But we moved to Pearl when I was in the 7th grade, and that's where I grew up from the 7th grade on.
Did you have any siblings growing up?
Had an older sister, younger brother.
What was your relationship like with them?
They were, of course, the sister and I, she was 14 months apart. She's 14 months older. And typical brother-sister relationship back when you're kids growing up and, fuss and fight and have fun and all of that. But she passed away just less than a year ago, lived out in Tulsa. And then my brother was 5 years younger. So different group of friends. We played ball together, things like that. As kids growing up, we would, I'd help coach his little league teams and things like that. But we got really close as we got older and became really, really close. And unfortunately, he passed away about 3 years ago. So I'm the only sibling left.
Sorry to hear about that, by the way. So your dad, I've heard you talk about your dad and the relationship you had with your dad and how you'd go to all these games with him, from softball to volleyball to baseball. So was your family an athletic family growing up?
Well, everybody except me. My dad was a good athlete. He had played high school football and baseball and basketball. He graduated Morton High School from Scott County, and that's where most of my relatives lived, or some of them still live that are on my dad's side of the family. But he played high-level baseball when he was in the Marines. And then when we moved back here to Pearl, he was working as a full-time employee, a civilian employee of the Air National Guard, but still wore a uniform to work every day and all that. So he was playing fast-pitch softball here in Jackson. The Air National Guard had a team in the fast-pitch softball league, the volleyball league. I've gone to high school football games with him. So I grew up around sports, and I love sports. My younger brother was a really good athlete. He didn't like it like I did. He liked playing in a band, and he liked doing those things more than he liked sports. But he was a much better athlete than I was. I was, of the three men, now my sister was not an athlete at all, but of the three guys in the family, I was probably the least athletic of all.
I've heard you say that you knew in 10th grade you wanted to coach. What was it about coaching basketball that drove that passion so much?
Well, actually in 10th grade, I wanted to be the next great left-handed pitcher for the New York Yankees. But when the fastball topped out at about maybe 70, I figured maybe I better choose a different line of work. And so actually, basketball was not what I wanted in my future. I was a baseball guy. My first coaching job, I was a baseball coach. And I was a high school baseball coach for 10 years. And so that was my passion, was baseball. I loved it and played it in high school. I got into basketball by accident. I like basketball. And of course, I went to school at Mississippi State. I watched the practices and really enjoyed basketball. But I got into coaching basketball by accident. I was teaching in Natchez, and at that time I was single, and one of my roommates, Chuck Norman, who played football at Ole Miss from Crystal Springs, he was coaching 7th, 8th, and 9th grade football and basketball at Montebello Junior High School in Natchez. And after the football season, where he'd coached all three teams, and he's looking, I got to coach all three teams in basketball, he asked me, will you coach the 7th grade basketball team? And I was teaching at the high school, teaching 5 math classes. And so I went to the superintendent of education, Dr. McLaurin, He said, yes, you can do that. And he said, we'll pay you a $200 supplement for doing that. So I coached the 7th grade basketball team at Montebello Junior High School. And somehow, I don't know how, we won the Miss Lou Conference Championship, the 7th grade Miss Lou Conference Championship. And so that's how I got into basketball. Still don't have that $200 supplement, by the way. I'm still waiting for that.
I think you've done well, right? You've done pretty well. So you talk about falling in love with basketball, kind of falling into it by accident. You go into Mississippi State and you reference those practices that you would watch at Mississippi State, legendary Babe McCarthy. So you would arrange your schedule so you could go watch those practices in the afternoon. How often do you reflect on watching those practices? You guys never got to meet, unfortunately, from what I understand, but do you ever reflect back on those practices and think, man, that shaped my career a little bit more than I thought it would?
Not really. Actually, I arranged my schedule so I could be in the gym in the afternoons, not necessarily to watch practice. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college. I had to pay my way through college, and I did that through student loans and jobs on campus. And so one of my jobs was working in the cafeteria. We called it the chow hall back in the day. And so then the other job I had, I was a student instructor in the PE department. And so I arranged my schedule so I could be in the gym in the afternoon for those PE classes. Now the cafeteria job didn't get paid for that. We just got our meals free. The instructor in the PE department, student instructor, we got 75 cents an hour for that. So if you work 4 hours a week, 4 days, I got $3 a week. That was my spending money. And so I was in there when basketball practice started in the afternoons, and I would sit and watch basketball practice. And I actually got to know quite a few of the players because practice couldn't start until a certain date, probably October 15th, which is the way it was when I was coaching. But they would come in and play pickup games in the afternoon. And if they didn't have 10 guys, they would ask me to play. And so I'd get to play pickup games with the basketball players there at Mississippi State. But as far as ever meeting Coach McCarthy, unlike youngsters now, who will walk up to you and just call you your first name, that kind of stuff, I never was brave enough to introduce myself to Coach McCarthy. I would sit in the stands and watch, and he would see me there, and he never walked over and talked to me, but he never ran me out of practice either. So I did get to watch the practices, and people ask me a lot the question you asked, how did that shape my coaching and things like that? I didn't know enough about basketball then, didn't realize, I couldn't recognize enough that it really had any effect on me other than to know, hey, this is something I like. I really like basketball. I like the pace of it. I like the way they play. I guess the best memory I have of Coach McCarthy, he seemed to be very patient in his teaching. I don't remember that he ever raised his voice. Now, he might have. I don't remember it. You'd have to ask some of his players about that. But he seemed to be a very patient teacher and seemed to have a great relationship with his players. And basically, that's what I remember about the practices.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
When you find a great community, you will find great health care. That is exactly what King's Daughters Medical Center provides. Keeping businesses moving with occupational wellness, heart-healthy screenings, diabetes education and management, community education, and remote patient monitoring that promotes better care in between regular office visits. KDMC, caring for our community like no one else can.
Wendy's $3 breakfast deal is a bacon or sausage croissant plus seasoned potatoes for just $3. It's the kind of breakfast that really sticks with you, especially if you're Tyler.
Taking my time, on my mind, baby.
Tyler.
Ah.
Our breakfast.
Oh.
If you want a better breakfast you'll never forget, Wendy's is that breakfast. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's $3 breakfast deal.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
For those on the go, we give you Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast.
What are we listening to? Are we listening to a playlist? Are we listening to a podcast?
What a great question.
Listen to our intimate interviews with guests on your favorite podcast platforms, including iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and so many more.
Do you ever look back and say, my life, the story could have ended up differently had it not been for your grandparents?
Incredibly different, for sure.
Plus, you'll hear behind-the-scenes commentary on each guest, interview preparation, location, and so much more from Jason himself.
Do you have a favorite Coach Bowden story that you can share with us?
I can tell you this, what you see with Bobby Bowden is what you get.
Check out Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast, on any of these popular podcast locations and hit subscribe, download, and enjoy. Now, back to the show.
So when you graduate Mississippi State, what were the goals and ambitions you had once you graduated from Mississippi State?
I wanted to be a coach. And of course, I knew, not having been a college athlete, I needed to get a teaching degree where I could get a teaching job. So I got a math degree. And interviewed all over the South, all over the southeastern United States for a math job. Was offered a job everywhere I interviewed because math and science teachers back then in the late 60s, they were scarce, they needed them. And Natchez was the only school that would let me have a coaching job. And I was the assistant baseball coach, an assistant fall cross-country coach, which back in those days, baseball we probably played 12, maybe 15 games. So you're at the bottom of the coaching ladder with those two sports. And so I understood that, but I was coaching, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I was teaching 5 math classes a day, and really with the cross-country thing, the track coach would just hand me a schedule every day, and I'd walk out there and tell the guys where to run. I didn't do much with that. But then I helped, I was the assistant baseball coach. And as I told you, I got into basketball that year by accident.
So 1984, you get a chance to be an assistant coach, your alma mater, Mississippi State, for Coach Bob Boyd's squad. The way that story unfolded is pretty remarkable when you look at the rest of your career, but take us through that and how all that came to be.
Well, John Brady, who was a friend of mine, John had played at Macomb High School when I was coaching at Natchez. So we had a familiarity with each other. And then John came to Mississippi State. John went to Belhaven and played basketball, and then came to Mississippi State as a graduate assistant with Joe Dean Jr. They were graduate assistants together. And I had a player at South Natchez High School that was being recruited by Mississippi State when John and Joe Jr. were graduate assistants. And so I got to know both of them because they were recruiting the player I had. And then through that relationship, when John graduated or finished his graduate work there, he went to Louisiana coaching high school basketball. And his relationship with Joe Dean Jr. through Joe Dean Sr. helped John get this job in Louisiana. And so then I became the coach at Colin Junior College, and so I was recruiting some of John's players in Louisiana. So we really got to know each other very well. So then John goes back to Mississippi State as an assistant coach and got me working Coach Boyd's summer camp. So that's how I met Coach Boyd. And so then Coach Boyd hired me, and I was the part-time assistant. Back in those days, you could have 2 full-time assistants and a part-time assistant. The part-time assistant could receive from the athletic department only the amount of a scholarship. That's it, that's all you get paid. So I had another job on campus. I worked over in college and school relations, as student recruiting office. And I don't know if you're familiar with Jimmy Abraham, who worked in that office and actually became director of the Alumni Association later on. And I tell him, I said, Jimmy, I signed your name to more recruiting letters than you did. So that was my job here. I'd go and sign the recruiting letters. And in the afternoons, I would go to the gym or the Coliseum. And then after 2 years, during that second year, Coach Boyd announced his resignation effective at the end of the year. And he recommended me for the job as the part-time assistant. And John and Larry Eustacia were the other two full-time assistants. And so I go in to see Charlie Carr, the athletic director, and I said, Charlie, you know, I would like to be considered for this job. Do you think I'd have any shot at it? He said, no, you probably don't have much chance at it. And so that rocked along, and they were trying to hire a coach. And we go to the SEC tournament. And I hear from Charlie's secretary while we're there that when we get back that Charlie's going to name a new head coach. And so Charlie Carr was the AD at that time, and he was in the same hotel we were in the SEC tournament. And I walked down and knocked on Charlie's door, and I said, Charlie, I know you're getting ready to name a coach fairly quickly. Am I still involved in this thing? He said, not really. So we go home, and it's a long story the way it happened, the day it happened, but his secretary called me one morning. She said, Charlie wants to know if you're in the office. I said, yep, I'm here. Said he wants to meet with you this morning like 10 o'clock. I said, okay. I said, is he getting ready to tell me I'm not getting the job? She said, I think so. So I go to Charlie Carr's office, and he starts interviewing me for the job. Who would I hire as assistants? Do I like recruiting? You know, the typical questions you ask. I go back and I tell John Brady, I said, John, I think I'm getting ready to be named coach at Mississippi State. In the meantime, John had heard Claire and Ledger called a press conference to announce the coach that afternoon. So I said, it might be happening. So then we get another call, the press conference has been canceled. So the secretary calls me back later on and says, Charlie wants to meet with you this afternoon and take you to the committee. I go meet with the committee, we go back to Charlie's office, he offers me the job, and I have this all in one day. I have to track my wife down. She's selling radio advertising in West Point. We have to track her down so she can be at the press conference when I'm named the coach that day. So it really was one of those deals where Charlie tried to hire some other people, and at that time, it was such a difficult job that a lot of guys turned it down because it had basically become a dead-end job. And I had one of the guys that interviewed for the job, a close friend of mine. He said, I can't take that job. It's a dead-end job. You can't win there. And that's basically how I ended up getting the job. I was kind of the last resort.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We believe patient-centered care is where it all begins. That's why King's Daughters Medical Center ranks nationally in patient care and safety. Our staff's commitment to better healthcare means a higher quality of life for so many. We are one team, one heartbeat, one mission to provide this community with the high-quality healthcare. KDMC, caring for our community like no one else can.
Wendy's without the Wendy's app is like a hamburger without the fresh beef.
No!
Get the app to order ahead, order delivery, earn free food, and get app-exclusive offers. One app, all the Wendy's.
So sweet, so crispy. Nobody makes breakfast as good as Wendy's new home-style French toast sticks.
Nobody.
Nope.
Keep talking. I can't hear you.
I should probably stop.
Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's home-style French toast sticks.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
For those on the go, we give you Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast.
What are we listening to? Are we listening to a playlist? Are we listening to a podcast?
What a great question.
Listen to our intimate interviews with guests on your favorite podcast platforms, including iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and so many more.
Do you ever look back and say, you know, my life, the story could have ended up differently had it not been for your grandparents?
Incredibly different, for sure.
Plus, you'll hear behind-the-scenes commentary on each guest, interview preparation, location, and so much more from Jason himself.
Do you have a favorite Coach Bowden story that you can share with us?
I can tell you this, what you see with Bobby Bowden is what you get.
Check out Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast, on any of these popular podcast locations and hit subscribe, download, and enjoy. Now, back to the show.
It's quite a roller coaster. Did you ever, I don't know if the phrase is lose hope. I mean, you wanted to be the coach so badly, particularly at Mississippi State. That's a big roller coaster to go through in one day, as you said. So was it ever this moment where you said, it's okay if it's not going to happen? Or did you just continue to have that faith and hope, hey, it's going to work out one way or the other?
You know, it went on for several weeks. And during that period of time, when Charlie told me I didn't have a shot at the job, you know, I just figured maybe I can stay here as an assistant with somebody, whoever gets the job. But in the meantime, you know, I was with Charlie during the days because John and I would come to the office every day. So I would see Charlie and we'd visit and things like that. And he never told me, no, you're not going to be the coach. So I always held out hope. I didn't know that I would get the job. But now that particular day, yes, it was kind of an up and down day. I interview, I think I'm going to get the job. The press conference gets canceled. Then I go meet with the committee. And when I met with the committee, one thing I can remember, I don't remember a lot about what went on there, but the one thing I can remember about that meeting with the committee, I said to the people there, I said, I know you've interviewed a lot of people, and I know a lot of people have told you how badly they want this job. I said, but let me explain something to you. You have not interviewed a single person who grew up listening to Jack Crystal broadcast Mississippi State basketball on the radio and fall in love with it and love this university and this basketball team like I do. I remember saying that in the meeting.
That's a pretty good selling point, right?
Well, I hope so. Something worked.
I've always wanted to ask you this following your career because I've heard you talk about making the practices very difficult for the team. So I wanted to go back to that first day in your office. You're the Mississippi State head basketball coach. Great feeling, right? But you're taking over a program that had won, I think, 21 combined games the previous 2 years. So did you write down, hey, this is the to-do list if we're going to turn this down? Was it a grease board involved, a legal pad? I mean, what?
Not really, no. I knew the kind of person I wanted to recruit for our program. I wanted young men that would represent our university in the right manner, in a class manner. And I wanted young men that had a great work ethic and that were competitive. And we didn't have any grand plan. Of course, I kept John Brady as my assistant coach, which was a great decision on my part. But we didn't have a grand plan. We tried to keep the team together that we inherited for a year. And some of the guys just weren't the kinds of guys I wanted representing my university, to be honest with you. And so we made some changes. And we signed 8 high school players, no JUCO players. I wanted to do it. I wanted to build it where it would sustain, where it would be something that we could be better every single year. Probably if I had to do it again, if I had any sense at all, I'd have probably gone out and tried to get some JUCO guys, turn that thing around right away. But we didn't do that. We signed those high school kids, and I think 5 or 6 of them were Mississippi players. And you know, none of them really highly recruited players. Ole Miss recruited them, Jackson State recruited them, maybe Auburn was recruiting a couple of them, but not big time recruits. But we got lucky. It was a great year for high school players in the state of Mississippi, and we hit on some of them. Turned out better than we thought they would be, and we worked them so hard because I knew the talent level we had might not be as good as Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, Florida. But I knew we could be tougher than they were, and I knew we could work harder, and I knew we could be in better condition than they were. And for those guys to go through what they did for the 4 years they were with me, they all deserve a medal, I'll be honest with you, because I can't explain to you how hard it was. It was brutal some days. I'm surprised some of them still speak to me, but most of them still do, believe it or not.
So when you came into the SEC, the coaches that were in the league at that time, I'm going to have to look at it to read it off. You had Eddie Sutton at Kentucky. Correct me if I'm wrong here. C.M. Newton at Vandy. Sonny Smith at Auburn. Wimp Sanderson at Alabama, Dale Brown at LSU, Norm Sloan at Florida. Plenty of reasons, right, to say, man, what have I got myself into? But I've heard the story about you and your good friend, Ed Murphy, who became the Ole Miss head coach, I believe the same year you did at Mississippi State.
Same year.
You guys are getting ready to walk into the SEC coaches meetings, and you're already laughing at Ed. Gives you a little pep talk, right? What's the story there?
Well, number one, you have to know Big Ed Murphy. You know, Ed's from New York, and Ed had played at Colin Junior College. He and M.K. Turk were teammates at Colin Junior College, and I coached at Colin. So the ironic thing is, at that point, with M.K., Ed, and myself, all three coaches of three major universities had a connection with Colin Junior College. But Ed's dad was a New York beat cop, and Ed was a product of that, and he didn't back down from anybody. And of course, he's huge, a big old guy. So we get ready to walk in the meeting. I won't give you the exact words Ed said, but the gist of it was, when you walk in this meeting, Richard, don't you look at any of those guys and call them Coach Sutton or Coach Sanders. You call every one of them by their first name. And I thought it was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got.
Did you do it?
Oh, absolutely.
What was the reaction?
No reaction. None of them knew me. And let me tell you a quick story about that first meeting, and this gives you an idea that people don't understand and don't know about Wimp Sanderson. Wimp Sanderson and his wife are checking in the hotel the same time my wife and I are for that first spring meeting when I'm named the head coach, and introduce each other. And I mean, we'd played against each other, and so, I told him who I was. I knew who he was. We go to the room, and about 10 minutes later, my phone rings. He said, "This is Wimp, and Ned and I would like to take you and your wife to dinner tonight." Wow. Now that says something. A man that was successful as he was, and he had no reason to have to do that. But he had been an assistant coach also at Alabama for a long, long time. He knew what it was like going to that meeting for the first time. And to this day, Wimp Sanderson's still one of my very best friends.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
Wendy's $3 breakfast deal is a bacon or sausage croissant plus seasoned potatoes for just $3. It's the kind of breakfast that really sticks with you, especially if you're Tyler.
Taking my time on my mind, baby.
Tyler,
Ah,
have breakfast.
oh.
If you want a better breakfast you'll never forget, Wendy's is that breakfast. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's $3 breakfast deal.
Quality of life is about lifelong care. Your family's health care is important to you, and that's important to us. King's Daughters Medical Center is here for your family in every stage of life, from the excited new parents, adolescent and teen years, to the big day. Walking alongside of you in life's journey, living a healthier life. KDMC, caring for our community like no one else can.
For those on the go, we give you Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast.
What are we listening to? Are we listening to a playlist? Are we listening to a podcast?
What a great question.
Listen to our intimate interviews with guests on your favorite podcast platforms, including iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and so many more.
Do you ever look back and say, my life, the story could have ended up differently had it not been for your grandparents?
Incredibly different, for sure.
Plus, you'll hear behind-the-scenes commentary on each guest, interview preparation, location, and so much more from Jason himself.
Do you have a favorite Coach Bowden story that you can share with us?
I can tell you this, what you see with Bobby Bowden is what you get.
Check out Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast, on any of these popular podcast locations and hit subscribe, download, and enjoy. Now, back to the show.
I can't tell you how much I would have loved to have been sitting at that table and hear that conversation back and forth, right? So you start at Mississippi State, couple 3 seasons there, a few seasons, you're building. Like you said, you're trying to get the players in there that can, first of all, withstand your practices.
Yeah.
So that 91 season rolls around, and I've heard you say that season in particular, we're going to talk about the Final Four, obviously, but that season in particular meant so much to you for a lot of reasons. Why?
Well, it's because they came in as a group of guys, as we said, not highly recruited players. The first year we got our head caved in a lot. We worked, but we just weren't very good. And to be honest with you now, I was learning also. You know, as a junior college coach, as far as the things you see as a basketball coach, the offenses, the defenses, all you see it all as a junior college coach. What you don't understand when you get to Mississippi State level is the degree of talent, the degree of athleticism, the strength, and those kinds of things. And I'd always been a set play coach. Well, we get to that level, and all of a sudden we're playing these teams bigger, stronger, quicker than we are, and they're just taking us out of our sets. And so I learned, and I hired a guy to help me teach motion offense. And so we became a motion team, because if they were going to take us out of our sets, we had to scramble. I wanted to scramble some rules. And so that really helped when I hired Jimmy Tillett, and he taught us motion offense. But those guys had been through so much, had been beat down so badly. Now, their junior year, we went to the NIT. First NIT, first postseason bid in a long time, and won a game in the NIT. And so the preseason polls come out the next year. And Kevin Skarbinski, a writer from Birmingham, who now is a very close friend of mine, by the way, because of the incident I'm getting ready to relate to you. He has this poll, and it says he picks us not the last in the league, but toward the bottom of the league, and you have a comment out there by every team. It said experienced losers. I picked the phone up and called Kevin Skarbinski. I said, Kevin, I want to explain something to you now. My guys might not have won a lot of games in this league, even though we did go to the NIT last year. I said, but they're everything but losers. They have great character, they have great work ethic, they represent our university in the right way, they represent their families in the right way. They are not losers. I'll promise you that. And Kevin and I now are very good friends. Well, I got that article because Dwayne Rebold, who had been on my staff, was coaching at Birmingham Southern in Birmingham, and he cut that article out and sent it to us. We posted it on our bulletin board. It was there every day for my players to see. Well, that gave us a little bit of an incentive, a little bit of motivation to play. But those guys just overcame so much and ended up winning or tying the SEC championship. And I've said it many times, Jason, I really believe this. In all my heart, I believe this. Without that 91 team, there never would have been a Final Four team, because that team changed the culture. That group of players showed people that Mississippi State can compete again, we can win again, and we can win at a high level again. And that's allowed us then to start recruiting better players.
You guys are rocking on along. You talk about the Final Four team. Was there ever a moment in the offseason, any of the practices, where you looked at that team and you said, you know what, we got a chance to do something really special this year before that Final Four run?
Well, you know, we'd gone to the Sweet 16 the year before. So we had a really good team. And what people don't realize, we lost 3 starters off that Sweet 16 team. Only Eric Dampier and Darrell Wilson, they were only 2 starters coming back. Now, Russell Walters had played quite a bit. Marcus Bullard had played a lot as a freshman. But the wild card there, the guy that really was the guy, was Dante Jones. We were able to sign Dante. And Rick Stansberry, who was my assistant at that time, another great move I made, because Rick Stansberry and John Brady, 2 of the best recruiters that ever have been, and I needed that. That was not my strength. I was coaching the team. And so Rick tells me, he said, you know, we can win the Final Four with Dante. I said, Rick, you're out of your mind. You know, Final Four, well, I know we're going to be good, but Final Four, you know. But once Dante really figured it out and started playing to his strengths and learning what my expectations were, we really gelled, and it was a really good basketball team. And as we got into towards the end of the season, we really started playing better because Dante was playing better. You know, we realized then we have a chance to be really good, And I never sat down and said, hey, we might go to the Final Four. But once we got in that SEC tournament and we beat Kentucky, I said, well, now, we can do that, we have a chance. And it turned out that way. Everything just fell into place for us.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
Wendy's $3 breakfast deal is a bacon or sausage croissant plus seasoned potatoes for just $3. It's the kind of breakfast that really sticks with you, especially if you're Tyler.
Taking my time on my mind, baby. Taking my time.
Tyler,
Ah.
Our breakfast.
Oh.
If you want a better breakfast you'll never forget, Wendy's is that breakfast. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's $3 breakfast deal.
Quality of life is about lifelong care. Your family's health care is important to you, and that's important to us. King's Daughters Medical Center is here for your family in every stage of life, from the excited new parents, adolescent and teen years, to the big day. Walking alongside of you in life's journey, living a healthier life. KDMC, caring for our community like no one else can.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
Works against Lance Weems. Bart will run the clock out. Not going to give it to Bubba Wilson. Wilson for three. Got it! Bubba Wilson may have made his first three of the second three of his career.
Well, I think they just gave him two, but it was a great shot from the corner for Bubba.
And Auburn puts up the final shot of the basketball game. The Bulldogs are the Western Division champions, 67-51, and there's bedlam at the Humphrey Coliseum.
It can truly be said that the Mississippi State University basketball team had arrived.
The coaching staff and maybe even the players, or did you sense it from the players that because of that Sweet 16 trip the year before, picking up a couple of wins, and do you feel like that maybe gave, I don't know, is confidence the right word, going into that Final Four season? Did it kind of give you guys some confidence to say, hey, we're here. We're capable of making a deep run in the tournament?
Well, we thought we could make a deep run in the tournament. That certainly gave us confidence. There's no question about that. But that 96 season, 95-96 season, you know, we were ranked top 10, top 15 in the country going into the season because of what we did the year before. And so we were rocking along, and I think a non-conference play we were like 10-1 or something like that. But we weren't playing well. I knew something was not right. We weren't playing well. Dante had become a new starter. Marcus Buller was a starter. Russell Walters was a starter. And we had some guys, honestly, now that just weren't on the same page the way they wanted to do things. And so we lost some games early. We got into conference play. Kentucky beat us badly at home, sellout crowd. And we'd beat Kentucky at Rupp Arena the year before, first time in the history of our university to do that. So I think the expectations were we'd win that game. We weren't able to win that game. And I called a meeting of the team, and I tried to talk to the players in terms of, you know, we're all on the same, we need all to be on the same page. We all have the same goal, we want to win. And just because you're different or you like different music, it doesn't mean you're against each other. And I used Dr. Martin Luther King's speech as an example. That, you know, it doesn't matter, you don't have to agree with everything somebody does, but you don't have to hate either. We're all on the same page. And I don't know if I should say this publicly or not, but we've made a rule. The white guys get to pick the music one day a week in the locker room. So one day a week we listen to country music because Russell wanted to listen to country music. And now before the year was over, you should have heard Dante singing the country music. It became a big joke with the team, it really did. But it brought them together. And once they came together as a group and started playing together, we were really good. We were really, really a good basketball team.
You heard it here first. Dante Jones was rocking out to country music.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
It's pretty good. So what's interesting about that tournament run, you start off with a win over Virginia Commonwealth, coached by Sonny Smith, who you had faced in the SEC, right?
Yeah, and Sonny's another one of my very good friends too now. When we would go to the SEC meetings, Wimp Sanderson, Sonny Smith, and Hugh Durham and I and our wives, we were always going to dinner together. We were the group.
So you start with that win over Virginia Commonwealth. Then you're playing Princeton, who Coach Carrill, this was his swan song season, if I remember right. He'd been there for 30 years. You guys are able to get past Princeton, and you're back in the Sweet 16 again. So for you and your coaching staff, how did you keep the team focused at that point? Because we're back in the Sweet 16, you're making this deep run. What did you guys do to keep the team focused at that point?
I don't know that we did anything in particular, anything differently than what we've been doing. We go home and we practice. And we practice hard and we prepare for the next games. And then we're going back to Lexington, Kentucky, where we had won the year before, as we said, against Kentucky. So it was a familiar place for us. And so then we play Connecticut. I think they were #1 seed. But by that point, Jason, our players felt like we were the best team in the country because we defeated Kentucky. But one of the best games we played during that run now, people don't even talk about it. We beat Georgia in the semifinals of the tournament. Georgia's a team that almost went to the Final Four. They were that good. And we destroyed them in the semifinals of the SEC tournament and then beat Kentucky. So our players were playing with a great deal of confidence. They really were. And we're able to beat Connecticut. Then we play Cincinnati for a chance to go to the Final Four. And one of the big issues that some people brought up was, well, you're playing Cincinnati, it's almost a home game for them. They're right across the river. One of the things I never did as a coach, or tried to never do, is talk to my players about, oh man, we're playing, they're gonna have a big crowd, it's gonna be their home game. You're giving your players an excuse to lose when you do that. I never brought it up with my players, never. I said, hey, they're gonna have a lot of people here. They are, but we're gonna have a lot of people also. And I said, it doesn't matter. I always tried to tell, we tune that out. All we're worried about, the guys we have on the floor in our uniform, the guys they have in their uniform, that's who we're playing against. We're not playing against anybody in those stands. So I think when you start bringing things like that up before you play, you're just giving your players an excuse to lose the game. So I've never used that kind of stuff. And we're able to beat, able to beat Cincinnati and go on to the Final Four.
What did Huggins say to you after the game?
He was just congratulations, that kind of stuff. I'll be honest with you how naive I was about that stuff. Bob Huggins had been coaching teams and he'd been to the Final Four. Before the game, and Bob and I had actually done a clinic or two together, so we knew each other a little bit. He said, now whoever wins this game, we need to buy the other guys Final Four tickets. I said, Bob, I got no clue what you're talking about.
Right.
I had no idea what he was talking about. But after the game, it's just, hey, congratulations, good luck, that kind of stuff. You don't spend a lot of time talking to the coaches after the game, or I didn't. Some coaches like to do that. I didn't like spending a lot of time talking to coaches after the game.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
When you find a great community, you will find great health care. That is exactly what King's Daughters Medical Center provides. Keeping businesses moving with occupational wellness, heart-healthy screenings, diabetes education and management, community education, and remote patient monitoring that promotes better care in between regular office visits. KDMC, caring for our community like no one else can.
Wendy's without the Wendy's app is like a hamburger without the fresh beef.
No!
Get the app to order ahead, order delivery, earn free food, and get app-exclusive offers. One app, all the Wendy's.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
So sweet, so crispy. Nobody makes breakfast as good as Wendy's new home-style French toast sticks.
Nobody.
Nope.
Keep talking. I can't hear you.
I should probably stop.
Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's home-style French toast sticks.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work
to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders.
Gotta have the ability to get their product to market.
Infrastructure stakeholders and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
Working against pressure now, and Bart begins to dribble it and move it around, and Cincinnati's not going to chase him. This basketball game is over. Mississippi State's on the way to the Final Four with a 10-point win over the Cincinnati Bearcats, and their Bulldogs all in the center of Rupp Arena, hugging one another, and some along the floor, a little bit of all of it.
Well, it's a great opportunity for Mississippi State in sports.
Yeah! Big boy! Run the ball, baby! Game ball! Game ball! We're going to the ball, baby!
You guys punched your ticket to the Final Four. It was the first and to this date, the only Final Four in school history, Mississippi history. You defeated 3 top 10 teams, if I got this right, held all of them to around 30% shooting from the field, give or take. So, a lot is said about your offense, Darrell Wilson, Dampier, Bullard, so on and so forth, but the defense was outstanding. Looking back, as I've heard you describe it, looking back now at your method to your madness is how you described it at one time. Reflecting on that moment now, and thinking, my gosh, we went to the Final Four. What comes to your mind?
Well, what comes to my mind, one of the things is we didn't beat Syracuse. That's what you always think about. But it was just a game. We were a perfect matchup for Syracuse. I've gone back and watched Syracuse play so many times, and our personnel was perfect for them. I think to play against Syracuse in that zone they have, you have to have somebody that can play in the high post area and make plays out of the high post. Shoot it, drive it, pass it. We played 2 bigs, neither could play in the high post. So we were a perfect matchup for Syracuse. If I'd have known then, have been smart enough to figure it out then, we might have won the game because I might have changed the lineup. But you reflect back on it now, Jason, and as I told the players after the game, after the Final Four when we got beat, I said, you guys don't really understand right now what you have done. Years from now, you will understand what you've done for yourselves, for our university, and for the state of Mississippi. This is a big deal. And right now you don't understand it, but you will understand it. And even to this day, it's still brought up by people. We see people all the time. And I'm introduced, this coach that took Mississippi State to the Final Four. Our players, people ask them, hey, you played on that Final Four team, didn't you? And so it's something that I think will always be a part of our legacy and the legacy of Mississippi State.
A couple seasons after that, you decided to resign. That had to be hard. So what was that moment like for you?
It was tough because, as I said, it was my school. We'd had a lot of sweat equity in that program, but it was time. We lost all those players off the team. We thought we'd have Dante back. We thought we'd have Marcus Bullard back. We had Tyrone Washington coming back as a sophomore. So we thought we'd be a pretty good team. But then obviously Dante declares for the draft. Marcus doesn't come back he got in trouble. And so we basically have a whole new team coming back. And I just felt so much pressure to keep the program going and be successful. And it just became overwhelming. And I was going through a lot of personal issues I needed to get straightened out. And after 2 years, I tell people, and I say this in jest, but it's the truth, I was miserable and everybody around me was miserable because it was just that at that point, and it was time. It'd been 12 years, it was time for a new voice. It really was. The players needed to hear somebody else. And so that's what happened. I had 30 years in the state retirement system, so it worked out okay.
It's crazy to hear that because looking at where Mississippi State basketball was before you took over, and it's almost like you've heard this, I'm sure you've heard this before, you became a victim of your own success, feeling that pressure. Do you kind of feel like that?
Without a doubt, no question about that. I told Coach Whitney one time, Coach Dave Whitney at Alcorn, he had some really good teams back in the day. And then Coach Whitney hired me to coach one of his minor league pro teams. He was a general manager in a team in Biloxi. And I told Coach Whitney, I said, Coach Whitney, you were your own worst enemy. He said, what are you talking about? I said, you showed all of us young coaches how to do it in the state of Mississippi. Signed Mississippi high school kids, some of them small school players, but kids that love this state and love to play in front of their home people and in front of their own fans. And now we're getting those same players that you used to get. You showed us how to do it. And he said, I never thought about that.
That's a pretty cool moment when you look back at it. Well, now you get to be connected to the game kind of in a different way, doing color for the radio network, Mississippi State Radio Network, with Neil Price, who does a phenomenal job, by the way. When did that start showing up on the radar, where you said, all right, I'm gonna give this a shot, and you're doing a great job with it. I had a chance to listen to you. So when did that show up on the radar?
Scott Strickland was the athletic director, and Scott Strickland's first job on campus at Mississippi State, some people don't know this, he was my basketball manager. And Scott likes to tell people I fired him. And I tell Scott all the time, I say, Scott, please quit telling people I fired you. I recognized your talent and we moved you to a different position in the sports information department, which is basically what happened. But Scott called me one day and he said, would you be interested in doing the radio? And as I told you before, when I did some TV work, TV show. I'd done TV games as an analyst for Comcast. I enjoyed that part of it. I had never done radio, and so Scott asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. And when Rick Ray was hired as the coach, I came on as the analyst, and it just went from there.
You're supposed to relax, though, Coach, and enjoy it. You still get really invested in it. I've heard you say this in some other places. You still get really invested in it because that's your school, that's your alma mater.
John Brady does the same thing at LSU that I do at Mississippi State. He's the radio color analyst. And of course, he coached at LSU, took them to the Final Four. And John and I are still very, very close friends. And he tells me all the time, he says, Richard, we get beat at LSU. I'm going out, I'm gonna have dinner, I'm gonna drink some wine, I'm gonna hang out with my buddies. I'm over it. He said, Mississippi State gets beaten, you get all red in the face and you pout and you don't want to talk to anybody. I said, John, it's that maroon blood in me. I love it. It's my university, it's my school, it's my people. I've got a lot of sweat equity in that program to this day. I believe that, and I want it to be successful, and it bothers me when we're not successful.
So I'm gonna switch gears on you a little bit, talking about that relaxation mode. What do you do? What do you like at home when you just want to relax and just chill out?
I watch sports.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of football, basketball, and baseball on TV. I read a lot. My wife and I have a condo in Biloxi. We go down there and spend a lot of time there. We've had a timeshare in Key West for several years. Go there every year to hang out for a week. Just traveling and doing things like that. I don't have any hobbies. I don't fish, I don't hunt, don't play golf, I don't do any of that stuff. I still love sports. I love being around sports. I love watching sports. I love talking sports. And other than that, we like traveling.
This is a question someone asked me to ask my guest this week. Do you have a guilty pleasure music? You know what that means, right? The music when you kind of look around and don't want anybody to know that you're listening, but you love it. Do you have a guilty pleasure?
I don't know if it's guilty pleasure. I love the old music.
Yeah.
What I listen to on my radio most of the time, 60s music, 50s music, and country music. Now, I was never a country music fan until all the, whatever they call this stuff now, and I can't understand the words. My dad was a country music fan, and my dad actually became a square dance caller using country music as his theme. My wife grew up with a father who played in a country music band, so she loved country music. Well, now I love country music also. So country music, 50s and 60s, that's what I listen to.
Wow. So talking about your dad, my final question for you. You went to all these ball games with your dad. Really, I guess you could say your love for sports came from your dad in a lot of ways. What would Dad think about all that you've done, all that you're still doing? Final Four, all of the success as a basketball coach, now doing something you love, being connected to the game still. What would Dad think about all this?
He would be proud. He'd be very proud of it. And my dad had some serious health issues. He had a leg amputated, and would still come to the games when I was a junior college coach, high school coach, junior college coach, in his wheelchair and things like that. And then when I was an assistant at State is when he got really sick, and he was in the VA hospital, and he knew I'd applied for the job. And my dad passed away early March when I was named head coach in March. He died before I was named the head coach. And my mother told me after that, one of the last things he ever said, he really at that time was on a ventilator, so he was writing, had to write what he said. One of the last things he ever said, I hope I live long enough to see him get the head job at Mississippi State. Wow. And he missed it by about 3 weeks. So I think he'd be very proud.
I know he'd be proud. Yeah. And this is an interview I've wanted to do for a long time. Final Four team, I remember being with friends at a watch party and just watching you guys progress. And it is one of the greatest moments. I've heard you ask the question before. It may be or may not be. That's for others to debate. No, it is one of the greatest moments in Mississippi sports history. And so thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for being a part of Audibles. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Jason. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Thank you. There you go. Just somewhere for us to mark the audio. You ready? Rolling, rolling, rolling. Let's get Coach out of here in time to go to dinner. All right, 3, 2, and 1.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week for another episode of Audibles with Jason Scarborough.